Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea, and it is an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, our international friends, gather around as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news and all sorts of good stuff. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of thought today was going to sort of be one of those, mostly just Q&A days, because not a lot of news. Then last night, I got told the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer was dropping this morning, and sure enough, it did. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of Mandalorian Season 2 trailer. That's obviously going to be the main thing we're going to be talking about here. And we're going to get to that in just a second. Just want to remind you guys, though, at the second half of the show, we're going to be taking your live comments and questions. If you have live comments and questions you'd like to send in, simply use the tip link in the top of the description of this video, or you can enter it in manually, streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. You'll be getting your comment and the show if it's appropriate. And of course, you'll be supporting the show at the same time. And all of us involved here with the John Campea Show, thank you guys so much for that. All right, guys. Couple things. One thing I want to talk about here first before we get into the Mandalorian stuff. Just one thing I want to talk about first. So we all know that we have entered into the age of the streaming wars, right? We've got, Netflix and Hulu. We got Amazon Prime. We've got Peacock, which they got to change the name of that. We got Apple TV Plus. We got Disney Plus. We've got all these things. Well, one of the other players in this game has, of course, been CBS All Access. And CBS All Access isn't bad, but they don't do a very good job. Well, number one, they do a terrible job marketing CBS All Access. Number two, they really haven't done much in the way of original content. I mean, they've got the Star Trek shows, and that's really all that I'm aware of. There might be other things, but they do such a bad job of marketing it. And I couldn't tell you what else is on CBS All Access. And I'm a CBS All Access subscriber. And I couldn't tell you what's on CBS All Access. Anyway, it seems like the folks over there understood that they've had a marketing problem. And so, some of you may have heard this, they are renaming and rebranding CBS All Access to Paramount Plus. Yes, there's that word again, plus. Now, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. First of all, the renaming of CBS All Access to Paramount something probably isn't a bad idea. CBS All Access just, I don't know, it doesn't sound like it's anything different. It doesn't sound like it's anything new from CBS. So rebranding it, I don't have a problem with them rebranding it. And using a name like Paramount, which is, kind of the parent thing, that makes sense. It's a recognized, respected name, Paramount. But I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. Plus? Again with the plus? Is there no originality left? Like, doesn't Disney Plus and Apple TV Plus, and I'm pretty sure there's another something out there that has plus in it. I can't remember. And Lucas Diego is saying in the live chat, yes, pretty soon, everybody. I'm going to let you know right now, announcing it right now. Pretty soon, I'm coming to you with John Campea Plus. It'll be the regular John Campea stuff, just, I don't know. I'll show you more of my feet. I don't know. Whatever will turn your crank to get you to pay the $19.99 a month to get John Campea Plus. So, and there's ESPN Plus, and there's plus. It's so idiotic. I remember when they came out and announced that Apple TV's thing was going to be called Apple TV Plus. I remember I was pretty critical of it. It's like, come on, seriously? Can't you come up with something different? Plus. Everything's got to be damn plus. Okay. It may surprise you to hear me say, I feel a little more lenient about the idea of Paramount Plus, and here's why. With things like ESPN Plus, ESPN's a big major name. With Disney Plus, Disney's a big major name. With Apple TV Plus, once Apple added that thing, that's another major brand. Basically what happened is that by Apple also naming their thing Plus, they kind of created an environment now where that is what we as audiences and consumers associate with as far as the higher quality streaming programming, we now just associate that word plus. And so, whereas I was very critical of Apple doing it, and I wish they hadn't, because if they hadn't, then we wouldn't see everybody else doing it too. But once Apple did it too, then it did kind of create an expectation. And listen, I'm only half joking when I say within the next year, I have almost no doubts that Peacock, which is the stupidest name ever conceived of, I almost guarantee you, and I'm only 50% joking, that within a year, they're going to change, they're going to rebrand that to Universal Plus. I mean, it's that big popular brand name Plus is just kind of what we expect now. That is the standard operating procedure. That is what we as audiences are looking for. As soon as we hear big brand name Plus, you and I now kind of automatically know basically what it is. It is the premium online streaming of that big brand name and all of their affiliates. And we just kind of know what to expect now. So as much as I hated it before, it is what it is now. And if that's what it is now, I kind of get the idea about why Paramount would come out and do this. And when Universal eventually goes to Universal Plus, and then we'll get Lionsgate Plus, and then we'll get Sony Plus, and it's just going to become the de facto. So it is what it is. What do you guys think about this whole thing about Paramount rebranding? And by the way, it's not just rebranding. they also announced they're going to create like 5, I think they announced 5 new original series that they're going to do and all that kind of stuff. What do you think about it? I admit, when I first read it, I was like, oh, come on, seriously, another name plus? But the more I think about it, I guess it kind of makes sense with the way the environment of the streaming networks is right now. So I guess I'm okay with it. I don't know. What do you guys think about it? Jump down into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys. With that down, let's talk about what we really all want to talk about here. My feet. No, what we really want to talk about here today is Mandalorian Season 2. Now, remember the other day they put out those images. I think it was Entertainment Weekly. I think it was EW that put out all the new images. And we talked about here that this is probably a harbinger that the trailer is probably about to drop imminently. Like any moment now, we're about to get a trailer. I got told last night that the trailer was dropping this morning, but I couldn't. The thing is, I couldn't make that the thumbnail and post. Here's what normally happens. What normally happens on my show is that the night before the show, I post the live event so people know what the main topic is going to be for the next day. But I couldn't do that last night until this morning after the trailer dropped. And anyway, long story short, trailer drops. And I will tell you right now, I think this trailer is absolutely fantastic. And it's not just because it's Mandalorian. It is structurally a fantastic trailer. Here's why. Follow me here for a second. You guys know, who watched me for any period of time, that one of my big things about trailers is that a trailer needs to communicate what is the movie, or in this case, this show. You got to communicate what it's about. You don't have to give all the spoilers away. You don't have to do that, but you at least got to communicate what this thing is about, right? The very first thing they do in this trailer, you know, as we see the ship flying towards the planet, it's obviously been through a battle. It's kind of sputtering. It's limping along. But the very first thing this trailer does, and this is why from a structural point of view, I find this Season 2 trailer to be absolutely freaking brilliant. The very first thing they do in the first 10 to 15 seconds is they flash back in audio form the conversations that Mando had with the head of the clan, when she basically said to him and commissioned him, your job now is to get this kid back to his people. This is the way. This is now your burden, your responsibility. Find out where his people come from, get him back to his people. Might need the Jedi to do that. Might even have to take him to the Jedi. Either way, that's what you got to do. From a structural point of view, what they did in this trailer was basically set up right away what this season is about. In the first 10 seconds, they said, okay, here's what this season's about. This season is about Mando needing to get this kid now and reunite him with his people, or get him to the Jedi, or whatever the case may be that you're looking at. This is what this season's about. So here's why that's brilliant. Once you set that up, then all the images and all the sounds and all the dialogue and everything that happens in that trailer from that moment forward, we now can look at in the context of what they set up in the first 15 seconds of the trailer. This is what the story's about. And now, as we see all the images, whether he's flying over sand people or flying over an ice planet or in a crowded town square, or whether he's at the Gamorrean MMA fights or whatever, we can look at all of those images, and we're looking at it through the prism of what they said this season was about. Too many trailers just throw up random clips of dialogue, random sound clips, random visual effects, random images, and just a bunch of random things like, ooh, isn't this cool? Well, no, we have no context for it. From a structural point of view, this Mandalorian trailer, to me, was absolutely brilliant. And we haven't even started talking about the fact that it's Mandalorian yet. So, okay, that's out of the way. Once they did that, remember, this is the first teaser for this, and I think we'll probably get another big promo for it prior to October 30th when this thing lands. But as we go through it, obviously we're going to get images of the child with Mando. The child is going to dominate the world again. Everybody, everywhere is going to be about Baby Yoda. And by the way, obviously Baby Yoda, if I can find the scene here. Oh yeah, this is the scene. This is like the scene from Mandalorian. He cracks out the sparrows. And that's what they were called, right? Isn't it the sparrows? The little weapons he got? Baby Yoda sees what's going on. He's like, F this. I've seen this dance before. Hits the button into his little thing. Best part of the trailer. Freaking loved it. And then the screen got to go black. And because we know those, again, is it sparrows, guys? Whistling birds. Thank you, guy. Thank you, Makey in the live chat saying it's the whistling birds. We know what they sound like. So the screen could go black and we didn't even have to see what was going on with the whistling birds. We could just hear the sounds and we could picture it in our heads exactly what was going on. Best part of the trailer. Now, let's talk about this for a second. And we're kind of going in random orders here, but let's talk about this for a second. This is a key shot that a lot of people are talking about. And I'm seeing a lot of people finally clued in, but no, this is not Ahsoka. This is not Rosario Dawson. This is Sasha Banks. So if the rumors are to be believed, the reports that came out a while ago, if it's to be believed, Sasha Banks is playing Sabine. That's what they said, at any rate. Whether she is playing Sabine or whether she is not actually playing Sabine, I actually don't know. I don't know for sure. But it's Sasha. It's Sasha Banks. And she is not playing Ahsoka. If the rumors and reports are to be believed, that's going to be Rosario Dawson. And that is not Rosario Dawson. So there's that. That's interesting to see. I did think it was interesting that they chose not to put Ahsoka in the trailer. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense, I suppose, because if you guys remember, and by the way, I have no insider information on this. When they announced that Ahsoka was going to be a part of this and is going to be played by the fabulous Rosario Dawson, she's just like, she's a goat. I love Rosario Dawson till the day I die. When they announced that the great Rosario Dawson was going to be playing the character, I speculated, only speculation, no insider information, that we were not going to see hardly anything in this trailer of Sasha or of Rosario Dawson. I really don't think we were going to see much in this season 2 of Mandalorian. I think we're going to maybe get one episode with her. Kind of like the way Ming-Na Wen was in season 1, and she just popped up for one episode and then she was gone. Maybe she's back in season 2. But I kind of speculate that I bet we get like one episode with Ahsoka. I don't think Ahsoka is going to be a big main thing in this. But I don't know that. And if that's true, then not showing her in the trailer, because here's what would piss people off. This would piss people off. If Ahsoka, and we're totally talking, we're just speculating here, but if Ahsoka is only, say, in one episode of this season, if you feature her in the trailer and then she only pops up in one episode, people would be pissed. People would be so pissed off. Like if they featured Rosario Dawson in this trailer, and then all of a sudden then we get to the season and people who are big Ahsoka Tano fans, I am not one of them, but people who are big Ahsoka Tano fans, if they featured her in the trailer and then we got to the season and just like she pops up in one episode, people would be understandably quite pissed off. Because it'd be like, you gave the trailer and you featured her and she's only in it for like one episode. Again, I don't know that she's only in one episode. Maybe she's in 5 episodes. Maybe she's in every episode. Maybe she's in 2 episodes. I simply don't know. My guess, and it's simply a purely speculative guess, is that she's probably only going to be in 1 episode. That's kind of my guess. Or maybe it'll be the same degree that Moff Gideon with Giancarlo Esposito. Maybe it'll be more along those lines. So yeah, I mean that. Also, I gotta say, I got a little ghibli seeing the classic X-Wing fighters in there. I don't know. There's something about X-Wing fighters that when I see X-Wings, this is a great shot too. This is beautiful of them flying through the clouds. Like I'm a simple guy. Show me X-Wing fighters, I get an erection. I mean, I'm a simple man with simple tastes, but show me X-Wing fighters, I get excited. And even though, you know, Mandalorian, the show, is very much feels like a Star Wars show. I'm not suggesting in the least that Mandalorian doesn't feel like Star Wars. It does feel like Star Wars. But for whatever reason, I have such a visual association with X-Wings that when an X-Wing shows up or I see an X-Wing on screen, I'm like, okay, now it's really Star Wars. And again, that may not be fair, but even just like in season 1, when we saw those X-Wings show up in that one episode, I'm like, okay, now I'm home. Like this, it's always felt like Star Wars. Mandalorian's great. I love it. But it's when the X-Wing showed up, suddenly I feel like I'm at home. So yeah, Baby Yoda once again is going to rule the universe. I don't think we're going to get a lot of Ahsoka in this. I do think it was interesting that they put Sasha Banks in the trailer, which makes me wonder if Sasha Banks is going to have a bigger role in this than Rosario Dawson. Because I wonder if maybe a part of it is going to be like 3 episodes of her as a part of leading Mando with the child to meet Ahsoka that happens in 1 episode. Again, I'm just purely speculating here. I'm just purely speculating. But those are my guesses right now. So overall, I got to say, guys, I love the trailer, both from a technical point of view and from a structural point of view of what they did with it and how they structured it, setting up what the season is about in the first 10 to 15 seconds so we can look at all the images and sounds that come after that within the context of what this show is going to be about this year. And I thought it was great. I absolutely loved it. I'm not going to pull any punches here. I absolutely loved this little teaser. So it's going to be interesting. So I wanted to know what you guys thought of this little teaser. So I decided to make that the topic of today's question of the day. And today's question of the day was real damn simple. It was simply this. The Mandalorian Season 2, let's see, I just put this up like an hour ago. The Mandalorian Season 2 trailer is here. So what did you think of it? About 2,300 of you guys have voted on it so far. 48% are saying you loved it. I got to admit, I'm in that category. 36% of you are saying you liked it. 12% of you are saying you're totally in the middle. You're meh. You're right in the middle of it. 1% of you say you didn't like it. And 3% of you said you hated it. So 84% of you guys are saying you at least quite liked it. 4% are saying you at least didn't like it, and 12% are saying, yeah, you're kind of right down the middle. You're kind of right down the middle of that. So anyway, this poll is up on the community tab on my YouTube channel. So go to my YouTube channel. You'll see the community tab. That's where the poll is. You can go in there and cast your vote on that. I'm going to keep that up for the next 24 hours. So the question here is, guys, what did you think about the Mandalorian season 2 teaser. I loved it. I hope you guys did too. All right, with that down, guys, let's get on and start taking your live questions that you guys have been sending in. I'm sure there's going to be a few things in here about the Mandalorian. Once again, if you want to send one, use the tip link that's in the top of the description of this video. You can just click on it there or enter it manually, streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. All right, guys, with that, let's get over to your live comments and questions. See what you guys are saying here. And sorry, I had a bit of a jump. Now I got to go re-find our start point. Where did it go? Where are we? I hate these jumps. Okay, sorry, we're almost there. Here we go. Frankie G writes, any memorable bad scenes in a bad movie? One came to mind this morning, Charles Dance's character in Space Truckers. Isn't that the, oh man, dude, the bad guy from Speed. And he was in, why am I freezing on his name? Easy Rider. Anyway, was the star of that movie. I never saw Space Truckers. Let's just be clear. I never saw Space Truckers. I know the film you're talking about, but I never saw it. Like having truckers with the crank start penis. No idea. Dennis Hopper. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dennis Hopper. Guys in the chat board putting it. Yeah, that's the Dennis Hopper movie, I believe. But again, I never watched it. It just looked way too cheesy. So I never even saw it back in the day. So I have not, but a bad scene, a particularly bad scene in a particularly bad movie. These are stuff that you generally don't hold on to and remember. So I don't carry around this. One comes to mind quickly though. It was in M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar: The Last Airbender movie. Now this is going to sound really mild, but it was in the very first few minutes of the movie. And I remember thinking, oh, this movie's going to be terrible. Because I actually was one of these idiots that had high hopes for that Avatar: The Last Airbender movie. I really did. I thought the trailers looked pretty good. They did look pretty good, to be fair. I thought the trailers looked good. I thought this was going to be a good movie. I really did. I believed it. Well, get into the movie. And it starts, and we're only a few minutes in. And Katara accidentally like freezes her brother, played by Jackson Rathbone. And it happened, and I remember it's like the camera goes to Jackson, and his sister's name's Katara, and he's like, Katara! I mean, I know that doesn't sound like much, but I am telling you, the moment they did that, and the moment they had him say the line like that, and I'm watching, and he goes, Katara! It's almost like do. And I remember watching it and going, oh my, and I was with my buddy in the theater, and I turned to him and I said, very quietly, of course, this movie's going to be awful. This movie's going to be awful. And sure enough, it ended up being terrible. So that's one that kind of comes to mind. That's one that comes to mind. Okay. Let's see here. Your crazy Uncle Jeff writes, John, don't you think the Oscar rules are unfair? 1917 would have never gotten an Oscar. 4 considerations are insane. They could have set it up so you only need to have 2 out of the 4 for consideration. It's like having an intern or something. That's what I'm here for. I am here to give you the information. I am like your own digital online intern, spreading the information to everybody so you can make informed decisions and form your own informed opinions. So thanks for that, crazy Uncle Jeff. All right, next up, we have Lawrence of Labia writes, as a longtime viewer of your show, it's hilarious seeing newcomers learn the hard way by asking questions like, what's your top 10 this? And wouldn't this person be great as that? If only people did more research before spending their money. Well, I mean, listen, people aren't spending money. People are tipping the show. They're just contributing to support the show. But I mean, you can't expect people to do research before, sending in a tip and asking a simple question. But then it's my responsibility to make sure I always make it very clear that, hey guys, look, I don't do top 10 questions. And I generally, my answer for what do you think of X actor and X role questions are always, I don't care. It's my responsibility to make sure I make that very clear so that other people don't, accidentally make that same mistake. But it's not people wasting money. I mean, they're just sending it in to be supportive of the show. So it's no big deal. All right. Brandon writes, Hey, John and Rob, if currently present. Rob is not here today. Have you seen the zombie movie Alive on Netflix? If so, what are your thoughts? It's a fun little movie for sure. Thanks. Tell you what, I haven't watched it yet, but I stumbled across a trailer for it on Netflix. Now, for those of you who don't know, it's this Asian zombie apocalypse movie, right? Okay, another zombie apocalypse movie. And no, it's not Train to Busan. But it's this dude is in his apartment as he realizes the zombie apocalypse is breaking out. So anyway, I saw the trailer for it. And then my wife, Ann, had gone to Vegas, not to go to Vegas, but she went with Corey to go visit Corey's mom. And so Ann made the road trip with her to go visit her mom. And while they were out there, they watched Alive. And Ann actually came back and said, have you seen that Alive thing yet? I said, no, I just saw a trailer for it. And she loved it. Ann loved it. So it's on my radar. I do want to check it out at some point, but I have not watched it yet. But it looks pretty good to me, Brandon. So I'm curious to see it. All right, let's see here. Next up, where we go. That was Brandon. So now we're looking at Dimension 20CH writes, I really hope Kang does get introed in Ant-Man 3 because it'll give more credence to my thoughts that the Young Avengers are being set up. I don't think so. I can see it now, the seed being planted with Kate Bishop and Hawkeye, then us getting stature in Ant-Man 3 thoughts. Now, I've had people telling me, honestly, since like 2010. Like literally, if you go back, and look at like old shows, like all the way back to For Your Consideration days. I've had people writing in for like 10 years telling me they're setting up Young Justice, or not Young Justice. Sorry, that's a totally different thing. They're setting up Young Justice League, Young Avengers, I should say. Young Justice League is another thing. They're setting up Young Avengers, and they're setting this up, and obviously they never were. So still today, people are still wondering if they're going to set up. Now, it's possible. It is absolutely possible. I don't think they are. I don't think this gives any credence to it whatsoever, regardless of whatever connections may happen to exist in the comics. I don't think they're doing that here. But it is certainly not impossible. And so if you're holding on to that, keep holding on to it. And let's see how things evolve, because we are entering into a major era of change for the MCU, right? We're entering into a major transitional phase for the MCU. And really, what has happened before isn't necessarily a good blueprint for what will happen in the future. So they may take a total left turn and do something totally different like that. Again, I don't think they are. But it's possible. It is certainly a possibility, and anything can happen in this big transitional period with the MCU now. Anything is on the table. Like, I mean, anything's on the table. If I had to bet $5, I would bet against it. But I wouldn't bet $100 against it. I certainly wouldn't bet 100. All right. Marie Seifring writes, hi, John and Rob. Rob's not here today. The Super Bowl trailer indicated that the Loki show on Disney will involve the TVA. How much do you think the Loki show and the next Doctor Strange will be involved in laying the groundwork for Kang's introduction? Thanks. I don't know. See, so we talked a lot about that. When the Loki trailer dropped, or Loki was at least a part of that whole presentation, and we saw TVA. So that's the Time Variance Authority, I think it is. The Time Variance Authority is the TVA. So we thought, oh, so that's obviously playing a part here in Loki. Now, obviously, there's time traveling implications with Kang. We talked about that on yesterday's show. So does the TVA, being a part of Loki, somehow going to be something that helps set up Kang? I don't know. See, because here's the other thing. Because Kang is such a major player in the comics, there's a lot of us right now making, quite frankly, a baseless assumption. And that assumption is, if he is playing Kang, and by the way, it hasn't even been confirmed that he's playing Kang, the star of, oh, and by the way, the latest episode of Lovecraft Country is one of the most bonkers episodes of television I have ever seen. And I loved every second of it. Holy crap. If you haven't watched Lovecraft Country, get on it. If you don't like season or episode 2, don't let that worry you. I didn't like episode 2 all that much either, but it picks right back up. Episode 1's fantastic. Episode 2, I was a little iffy on, but episodes 3 and 4, and I think we're on episode 5 now, have been great. But this latest episode is one of the most bonkers things. Anyway, Jonathan, who plays the lead in Lovecraft Country, he, of course, they've announced on Deadline that he's going to be a dominant figure in Ant-Man 3, and they're saying that they have sources saying that he's going to play Kang, although it hasn't been confirmed yet. But let's go under the assumption that he is indeed playing Kang. Many of us, myself included, have made the unsubstantiated assumption that, oh, if it's Kang, then that means that Kang is going to be the next overall big baddie of the MCU. That Kang is going to be the next Thanos. The reality is, though, even if he is playing Kang, even if that's the case, and he's playing Kang, it doesn't just because he's a big, significant A-lister in the comics, it does not automatically mean that he's going to be, the next big thing. They got to set him up, and he's going to be the next big major threat for this next phase of the MCU. Now, that is what I'm assuming. And, Rob and I talked about it yesterday. That's what Rob is assuming too. And I know a lot of you guys are assuming that as well. But if we're going to be factual for a moment, even if he is playing Kang, he's not necessarily the next big baddie for the MCU. He literally could be a one and done villain. He literally could be. I mean, it feels weird, but that's exactly what it could be. So maybe there is no tie-ins to the TVA or the Time Variance Authority. Maybe there aren't, but maybe they are. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see over the coming weeks, like where this all kind of evolves. But that's a good catch, Marie, like kind of making those connections there. All right. Evan Ryan writes, hey, John, over under 50% that we see Joel Edgerton return in the Obi-Wan series. Thanks. Man, I started talking about that a long time ago. I'm going to go under 50%, but it's barely under. Like I would say like it's a 45% chance. Because listen, if Obi-Wan is overseeing Luke or watching over Luke from a distance, he's with Uncle Owen. Uncle Owen is played by Joel Edgerton, or at least has been played by Joel Edgerton. So it would make sense that he would be in it. But just because Joel Edgerton played him before doesn't mean he would agree to come back and play it again. And it doesn't even mean that we're going to see Uncle Owen or Aunt Beru in it. I mean, I'm assuming that they are. So I would say under 50%, but just barely under 50. Because, like, again, it just makes sense that they do it. So let's wait and see. All right, next up. Tajin Cars writes, from all that I'm reading, it's best to watch Tenet on a regular screen theater. All of the sound issues seem to be with Dolby and IMAX screens also. The movie doesn't stop. I love that, but for me, it may be a turnoff. The movie doesn't stop. I don't know any movie that does stop. At any rate, yeah, one of the big issues with Tenet has been the sound. I had a buddy of mine call me yesterday and say, John, I've been watching your show and you keep talking about the sound issues with Tenet, but I haven't actually heard you say what you really think about Tenet. And I realized he's right. I really haven't. The main reason I haven't really talked about Tenet is because of all the different sound issues, I don't know that I can really give an opinion on the movie. You know what I mean? Like there are a number of key scenes that I just couldn't understand what it was they were saying. And I'm not talking about the scenes where it was intentional that way. I mean, I know in Tenet, there are a couple of scenes where clearly Christopher Nolan intended for us not to know what one of the people was saying. I understand that. But then there are other scenes, key scenes, where there's dialogue going on, and I couldn't understand what it was they were saying. And while I may have a stupidity problem, I certainly don't have a hearing problem. So that made it, since I didn't know what they were saying, I couldn't properly interpret what was then happening next. Like I could still appreciate what was happening next, but without that context of what the narrative was giving us an exposition, I couldn't really I don't know. That's the key. I don't know if I was properly interpreting the next scenes or not. So I don't really know what I thought of Tenet yet. I need to go watch it again. So I'm going to go see it again this week, probably take Anne with me. This time I'll give it another shot and try. Maybe I'll go see it in a non-IMAX or a non-Dolby theater, see if I have a different audible experience with it, and we'll see where it goes from there. Anyway, thanks for that, Taj. All right, next up, Tony Karan writes, regarding Tenet, I think going to the cinema is still seen as many as a risk during this pandemic. I think ultimately a movie like Tenet, which requires multiple viewings, may be seen as more of a risk. Personally, I'm waiting for VOD streaming and subtitles. That is actually the best argument I've heard for a lot of people about the about watching Tenet at home, is that, hey, if you're watching at home, you can turn on subtitles and then you're good to go. Yeah, there are clearly still people that going out to a grocery store or going out to a restaurant or going out to a movie theater is still seen for them as being a little bit too much of a risk. And I respect that. I totally do. To me, you guys have heard me talk about this before. It's all a matter of mitigating the risk and minimizing your risk. Like, I will go into a grocery store and shop for my groceries if I know that that grocery store has strict safety rules, they require everybody to wear masks, they only let X number of people in there at once. If I see them doing that, then I feel comfortable going in. I mean, it doesn't completely eliminate the risk, but nothing will completely eliminate the risk. If I at least see they're doing stuff to minimize risk, then I feel comfortable going in. That's just me. That includes movie theaters. Like if I showed up to the AMC 30 in Anaheim to go see Tenet the other day, if I showed up there and I just saw them the place was overcrowded and they weren't making people wear masks and they weren't doing anything about social distancing, I just would have said F this and I would have left. But I got there. They had limited the number of tickets that they sold. They were enforcing social distancing in the theater. They were having team members get your drink so you're not touching the drink dispenser that 100 other people have touched. They required you to put on hand sanitizer. They were wiping down all the chairs. I went in there and I went, you know what? This place is doing what they need to do to make this as safe as possible, to minimize the risk. So I feel comfortable going in. Now, for some people, that won't be good enough. And I respect that. For me, that is enough to make me feel comfortable, but it's going to depend on a person-to-person basis, Tony. All right, Eric writes, I had a dream that 2 terrorists took you hostage on your show and forced you to do trivia. I thought, is anyone going to call the police? I went to your house because I'm a caregiver and you were my client. I helped you lock them out and call the police. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to interpret that dream for you, Eric. But that's certainly a vivid one. Thanks for sharing. All right, next up, Shadow Jester writes, hello, John and Rob. Maybe I always seem to miss him and today's not here. But with the Flash movie comments, maybe unpopular opinion, I think it might be a way to bring in Pattinson while not recasting Aquaman, Wonder Woman, or Supes, but it won't sweep Batfleck under a rug. See, I disagree. And Rob and I were talking about this the other day. While a number of people are looking at Walter Hamada, who, let's just talk for a second about how great of a job Walter Hamada has done since taking over the reins at DC for Warner Brothers in the DC movie universe. What a job he has done. Anyway, when Walter Hamada at DC Fandom talked about, multiverse and stuff like that, a lot of people looked at what he was saying as, oh, this is now opening the door so they can cross over everything. But what Rob and I kind of both feel was, it's actually what he was saying was the exact opposite. That was his way of explaining how we're having all these different stories that are separate from each other. It opens the possibility that they can do some crossover stuff. But to me, the multiverse stuff isn't about, for example, the multiverse stuff is not about bringing Robert Pattinson's Batman into the existing DCEU. It is simply a mechanism to explain why he's not coming into the existing DCEU. Multiverse, that's why he's not connected. Multiverse. It's not a way to explain why we're going to have Joaquin Phoenix's Joker pop up in the next Superman movie, it's actually a mechanism to explain why he's not popping up in other people's movies. Multiverse. He's in his own corner of the multiverse, not connected to anything else. It's all the multiverse. So yeah, while a lot of people interpreted Walter Hamada as saying, we're opening the doors to everything, to me, it was him explaining, this explains why you don't see Robert Pattinson with Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. This is why you don't see Joaquin Phoenix's Joker with Robert Pattinson's Batman. Multiverse explains why they're being kept separate. Now, it does, of course, give them a narrative tool if they ever want to do some kind of crossover. It gives them a narrative tool where they can accomplish that. But again, yeah, I kind of interpreted Hamada's explanation as being completely opposite of what other people are kind of interpreting now. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as it normally is. The truth is probably somewhere more in the middle, but that's just kind of the way I've kind of interpreted that now. Okay, let's see here. We are now at Starscream writes, hello, John. Hope all is well. It is all well. I work with a person who loves Bond, but says he won't see the newest Bond because of the rumors of 007 being replaced by a woman. Why are strong female characters so threatening to men in my age range? Saw Doom Patrol. It's great. Doom Patrol is awesome. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really want to go into it. Look, there are just some guys who are a discredit to real men. There are some guys out there who are so threatened that they get their backs up and they get totally knee-jerked whenever they hear anything about women. Women taking lead role. It's pathetic, to be honest. It's just pathetic. Now, that's not to say that there's never legitimate criticisms to be had outside of that, but yeah, like the whole notion of I'm not going to watch Bond because I heard a rumor that the next Bond might be a woman. It's like, really? What? So you're not even going to wait to see if it's awesome? You're just going to, if they made Bond was going to, if the next 007, if the next person to take up that employee number 007 is a girl, that's just enough for you to say, I'm not watching it anymore? I don't know. To me, that's really weak. To me, that's really weak. That tells me you're pretty mentally weak. That doesn't mean there couldn't be other legitimate things. Like, I don't like the particular actress doing it. I've never liked that person's work. I don't like the writer on it. They wrote other things before and I didn't like what they wrote. There's a lot of legitimate things. And we got to be careful never just to lump everybody into one big pile, because everybody has different points of view and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of legitimate ones that could cause people concern. But every once in a while, you're right, Starscream, you just come across a person who just the flat out issue is their own insecure in their own masculinity, that they are automatically threatened by a woman doing anything. They're not the majority. They're very much a minority. But it is there, and it's kind of sad to see that men have become so weak. Anyway, Dan Ketchum writes, part 1 of 2. You know, I hadn't watched the prequels since they came out, but a family member made us all sit down and watch them. And you know what? They were even worse than I remembered. God almighty, they are terrible. Part 2, worst dialogue in the history of the world. The lines were so stilted and awkward. Couldn't someone have staged an intervention and explained to George Lucas that he needed to leave the writing to somebody else? Anyone else? Yeah, you know what the funny thing is? Now, I am infamously not an appreciator of the prequels. I do not like the prequels. I think they're terrible. I will say this, though. I will say this. In the last season of when I was at Collider, you know, we were doing some movie watch-alongs, and we decided to do the Star Wars prequels. And they are terrible. I will say this, though. The Revenge of the Sith, was the least offensive of them. And the Revenge of the Sith wasn't as bad as I had remembered. It's still awful. I mean, it's still awful, but it wasn't as bad as I had remembered. The other thing I want to say about the prequels is this. There are elements in the prequels that I quite appreciate, dare I say even love. There are some elements in the prequels I actually love. Like pod race scene, one of my overall favorite sequences in all of Star Wars. I love the pod race scene. I think the pod race scene is absolutely fantastic. And some legendary, what makes the pod race scene as great as it is the legendary sound design by Ben Burtt. The legendary sound design by Ben Burtt. The sound design of the pod race stuff just immerses you so much into it. It's fantastic. Obviously love the Darth Maul stuff. I love the Yoda fighting stuff. It's funny because even prequel lovers, a lot of them will say they hate the Yoda fighting stuff with him jumping all over the place. I hate the prequels, and I loved every second of Yoda fighting. Whether he was fighting, Count Dooku, or whether he was fighting the Emperor, didn't matter. Yoda flipping all over the place, showing the speed advantage, the dexterity, the technique advantage. If you want to get into MMA stuff, just showing that off. I loved it. I loved it. I thought those scenes were great. I will also say this about the prequels and about George Lucas writing them. If you took the 3 prequels and broke it down by story points into, say, like a 4-page outline, right? If you took all 3 prequels and broke them down into a point-by-point story breakdown, a 4-page story breakdown, I would make the argument that the bones are there for a really good trilogy of movies. I would say that the bare bones, the structure is there for a great trilogy of movies. The problem with the prequels was all in the execution. And I think you're right. I think if George Lucas had crafted the story and broke it down into like a 4 or 6 page outline, say, so this happens, this character, this happens, this character, this happens, and then took that 6-page like kind of breakdown of the trilogy and then handed it over to a different screenwriter, I think we could have gotten something a lot better. And I say that as a George Lucas worshiper. I have a little altar. I don't burn incense at it, but I might start doing it. I have an altar in my house to George Lucas that I will worship and pay respects to every day for the rest of my life because I love George Lucas. But it might have been a lot better. But again, in the prequel's defense, I think the Revenge of the Sith is the most tolerable. I think there are elements in the prequels that I love to this day. And I think overall story structure-wise, if you just broke it down into its bare bones, I think the story structure for the prequels are actually quite good. It was just, to me, it was all in the execution. But that's just me, Dan. All right. Let's see here. We are at Jesse, who writes, "Hey, John, I've heard you speak on the Tenet sound mixing issue, but I've also heard from other reviewers that the film feels emotionally distant and characters can come across as cold with not a lot of heart. How was your film experience with this aspect of the film?" Well, Jesse, this goes right back to what I was saying earlier. I don't know if the characters came across as emotionally distant because I couldn't understand the dialogue a lot of the time. And so maybe if I understood the dialogue in scene, X and scene X and scene X, maybe the characters would have come across a lot more emotionally fleshed out, maybe not as cold, but I simply don't know. So that's why I need to go back and watch it again. So that's why when my friend asked me, hey, what's your overall thoughts on the film aside from the sound editing? And I'm like, because the sound mix was so bad, I don't know what I thought about it. Including, I couldn't tell you if I thought the characters were emotionally cold or not. So I got to go back and see it again. And this time, hopefully be able to really pick out what it is that's being said. So it'll frame the proper framework to the movie that I'm watching. So yeah, that's kind of my thought on that, Jesse. All right. Abel Leon writes, "Hey, John and Rob, I was wondering if you have seen Netflix La Casa de Papel, also known as Money Heist. It's, for me, one of the Netflix's best shows, on par with Umbrella Academy for me. Have a good day." No, but I am definitely not the first person, you're definitely not the first person that has recommended it to me. I've had a number of people recommend Money Heist, and they've been recommending Money Heist to me for a long time, like ever since it debuted. And I went so far as to get on Netflix and watch the trailer for it, and it does look pretty good. It looks pretty good. But no, I have not had the opportunity to watch it yet, but a lot of people are raving about it. Do me a favor, guys. If you yourselves are one of the people who watch it, can you jump down in the comments and let me know what you think about it? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks for saying that, Abel. All right. Bojax writes, hey, John, at the AMC 30, that's in Anaheim in Orange County. At the AMC 30 you went to in Anaheim for Tenet, did you watch it on the IMAX with laser projection or Dolby Cinema? That's the main theater I go to, and I was wondering which presentation might be best. I will always choose the AMC Dolby Prime. I will always choose the Dolby Prime. To me, the Dolby Prime is the superior viewing experience over IMAX. Not everybody feels that way. But that's just a personal preference. Like if I have a choice, IMAX or Prime Digital Dolby, I will go to the Dolby Cinema at AMC Prime. I will always choose that every time. Not that I have a problem with IMAX, not at all. If the Dolby Cinema isn't available, I'm more than happy to go into the IMAX one. But yeah, I went to that one. All right. But Dog writes, Christopher Nolan has so much clout at Warner Brothers, he could probably walk in and shit on Toby Emmerich's office floor without consequence. You're not wrong. How much will Tenet's underperforming box office impact Nolan's being able to dictate contractual terms for films? Zero impact. Zero impact. And here's why. No studio anywhere is looking at anything that happens in the pandemic as any indicator of anything, right? No studio is looking at what happens with the movie, good or bad, right now as being an indicator of anything at all. These are completely unprecedented circumstances and unprecedented times that we are living in. And as a result, none of the studios, like let alone those at Warner Brothers getting to work with Christopher Nolan, Warner Brothers is very, very serious about staying in the Christopher Nolan business. He makes them tons of money. He gets them awards consideration. He gets them a lot of clout and a lot of prestige. And that matters a lot to these studios. And no matter what happened with Tenet, like Tenet has already crossed over 200 million, even if it only made $5 million by this point, instead of the 200 it's made, let's say it's only made $5 million, it still wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter because it's happening right now. Now, having said that, if we were living in a post-pandemic era right now, or if we were living in the pre-pandemic era right now, and Tenet had come out and made just over $200 million right now, that might have an impact on things. But as of right now, no studio is looking at anything that happens with any movie as an indication of anything at all, because it's completely unprecedented times. Everything is so out of whack right now. Nothing is normal. So yeah, no, like, let's see. What has you done, Christopher Nolan? Well, I did, Memento and Batman Begins and Insomnia and The Dark Knight, by the way, and The Dark Knight Rises and The Prestige and Inception and Interstellar. Oh, and then a bunch of Academy Award stuff for Dunkirk and like win. Oh, and by the way, during the pandemic, we released another movie that didn't financially do what we were wanting it to do during a pandemic. Well, that changes No, it doesn't. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change a single thing. So, no, I don't think good or bad results of Tenet right now are going to change Christopher Nolan's status or clout with Warner Brothers or anybody else at the moment, to be honest with you. All right. But Dog also writes, I read in the Daily Beast that David O. Russell once threw Christopher Nolan in a headlock at a dinner party to bully him over Jude Law's schedule, and Nolan sadly acquiesced. How does something effed up like this impact either director's stature in Hollywood? I don't believe that story at all. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I believe you probably read that, but I don't believe that story at all, just to be honest. All right, Benjamin Mason writes, and tip $20. Thank you so much, Benjamin, for supporting the channel on that level, dude. Benjamin writes, sup, John? Big fan of the show. Thank you so much. After learning what DC is planning to do with the multiverse, I decided I really want to see the CW Flash and Supergirl get revamped and appear on the big screen. Do you think that could happen, and would audiences approve? I don't think that'll happen. You got to understand, CW shows, by normal standards, do not get a lot of viewers. Like, CW shows do not get a lot of viewers. That's just the reality. You can look up on Google television rating numbers and blah, blah, blah. The CW shows do not get a lot of viewers. Here's the problem you have. You try to go to Warner Brothers and make an argument that you want to take Grant Gustin's Flash and make a movie out of Grant Gustin's Flash, right? And put it in theaters. Here's the pushback you're going to get and the questions you're going to have to answer. They're going to say, okay, you know what, just for the fun of it, let me see if I can pull up an actual number here. I'm going to see if I can actually pull up a number. My guess is it's around 3 or 4. No. Okay. So you are going to have to pull up, come up with a reason and justify why Grant Gustin's Flash, which people can watch for free on TV, and you know how many people watch it? Roughly 2.8 million people watch it. Roughly 2.8 million people watch The Flash. So anywhere between 2.8 and 3.5 million people watch The Flash. When Grant Gustin's Flash is on TV for free, 2.8 million people watch it. If, and this is a big if every single person, which they won't, but if every single person bought a movie ticket to go see Grant Gustin's Flash movie, if every single person that watched Grant Gustin's Flash TV show bought a ticket to go see it, with the average movie ticket price in America being $10 a ticket, that means that Flash movie is going to make $28 million. Now, I'm just telling you that if you were a junior executive at Warner Brothers and you wanted to go into the more senior executives' offices and make an argument and pitch an idea to take Grant Gustin's Flash and turn him into his own feature film that we spend $100 million on, they're going to say to you, okay, junior vice president, only 2.8 million people watched the last episode of The Flash. If every single one of them bought a ticket, and they won't, but if every single one of those people bought a ticket, that's still only $28 million. Explain to me how we're going to make our money back if we make a Grant Gustin CW Flash TV Flash into his own feature film. You got to justify and come up with how that's going to be the case. And that's the problem. That's why when a lot of people suggested, like, one of my favorite shows, and it's on the CW, is Supernatural, a lot of people say to me, John, wouldn't it be awesome if they did a Supernatural movie? I'm like, yeah, it would be awesome if they did, but they'll lose tons of money, so they absolutely shouldn't. From a business point of view, it would be a terrible idea to make a Supernatural movie, because only so many people watch it when it's free, let alone ask them to pay $10 to go see it. So I'm just saying, Benjamin, those would be the hurdles you'd have to overcome. Because let's say a Flash movie based on Grant Gustin's CW Flash, let's say after expenses, marketing, and everything, let's say that movie needs to make, let's go really low. Let's say it needs to make $250 million. It needs to make $250 million worldwide to break even. Okay. The executive's going to ask you, so that means you need to show me you can get 25 million people watching a free episode of The Flash. Are 25 million people watching The Flash for free? Because if they're not watching it for free, what makes you think they're going to pay $10? So anyway, that's the problem, Benjamin, that you have to run into. All right. Next up, Doolittle's mom writes, what are your thoughts on Mulan's performance in China? Think this is why Disney put it on Disney Plus? And do you think it'll be profitable? By the way, my son says give his film another shot. Like Tenet, you need to repeat viewings to understand it. You just don't get, Doolittle's mom, your son's Doolittle. Listen, after seeing Mulan, which, by the way, I liked, it's not great. It's nowhere near as good as I was hoping it would be, and it certainly isn't anywhere near as good as it looked. it's a movie of missed opportunities. At the end of the day, I still liked it. I did. But it's certainly not a great film. It's certainly not a memorable film. But you remember after I saw it, I talked on the show about how, well, this makes explain a little bit Disney's decision, their odd decision to take it to Disney Plus. This might explain it. And so, yeah, apparently like the Chinese audience just, again, we're living in pandemic era, so you can't really read too much into the box office. Anybody that tries to read too much in the box office, I mean, it's kind of folly right now because it is pandemic, but the people in China who are seeing it basically aren't liking it. I mean, and that's the problem. And much like, remember, Disney also took their Artemis Fowl movie and moved it over to Disney Plus, and we quickly found out why. Because Artemis Fowl was terrible. And none of us, especially me, thought the same thing when they announced they were moving Mulan, because Mulan looked awesome, right? So none of us, especially me, thought it had anything to do with the quality of Mulan, but maybe it was. Maybe it was. So, we'll have to see what happens here. All right, Willow writes, would you consider Enola Holmes to be one of the worst trailers you've seen? No, I think it was a bad trailer. I don't think it's one of the worst I've ever seen, though. Since it deflated your interest in the movies, it's apparently getting pretty good reviews. Yeah, I've heard it's all right. I've heard the movie's okay. I thought it was a bad trailer. It's not one of the worst I've ever seen, though. It's not one of the worst I've ever seen. You know, I put out a statement that said it was one of the first movies, because I was really excited about Enola Holmes. I thought the concept was really interesting. You got Henry Cavill in there as well. I thought I was very excited about it. And then the trailer was quite bad, and it kind of lowered my expectations of it. But that just meant to me it was a bad trailer. But I wouldn't say it's one of the worst I've ever seen. We've all seen worse trailers, but yeah, to me, the trailer was a bad trailer. Just not one of the worst. All right, Doolittle's mom also writes again. Thoughts on Mamoa coming out to defend Fisher and saying serious shit went down on Justice League set? In my opinion, between this and Boyega, shows that Hollywood needs to do a better job giving actors of color more meaningful and respectful roles in big franchise, because this is trash. I'm going to say something here that is going to sound, especially for me, really out of left field. Because I don't buy into the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory shit. This is going to sound a little bit out of left field for me. But it's kind of where I'm at. First of all, understand that for all of us, what we think or believe is not the same thing as things we know to be true. What we believe may not necessarily be the same thing as something we know to be true. Okay? For example, Moonlight won Best Picture at the Oscars. I know that to be true, right? That's factual. I know that to be true. I believe that the New England Patriots will not go to the Super Bowl this year. I don't know that to be true. It's just what I believe. And as the season progresses and new information comes, maybe I'll change what I believe. For now, I believe the New England Patriots will not go to the Super Bowl this year. But that is different from what I know to be true. Right? So let's just be clear on that. For those of you who don't know what Jason Momoa just came out and said, he just came out and said something very peculiar. Like, really peculiar. He came out and made this statement kind of in support of Ray Fisher, which was fine when he did that. Like, he never backed up anything Ray Fisher said. He just said, I support Ray Fisher. Nothing wrong with that. Great. It wasn't saying anything one way or the other. Fine. But he just put out a statement the other day that is so peculiar, I'm starting to suspect something really, really strange. So Momoa comes out and says, hey, need to take this stuff seriously. There was some serious shit that went down. But in the statement, he said this: people putting out fake stories about Frosty the Snowman without my permission. Because you guys remember, back a couple of months ago, Deadline ran the story that Jason Momoa had signed up to do a Warner Brothers movie as the voice of Frosty the Snowman with, was it Berg, who's one of the guys involved with Justice League, but Berg is one of the executives on that movie and blah, blah, blah. So Jason Momoa comes out the other day, and as a part of this really odd statement, says, release this fake story about Frosty without my permission. Well, wait a minute. Is the story about Frosty true or not? You say it's a fake story, but you say they released that information without your permission. If it's a fake story, why would they need your permission? If they need your permission, how could it possibly be a fake story? Here's where it gets interesting to me, and this is where I'm going with this. If Deadline's story about you being in Frosty and doing the voice of Frosty the Snowman with Berg, with Warner Brothers, if that wasn't true, and we know Deadline talked to your agent, why didn't anybody tell Deadline that the story wasn't true? Now follow me here. Because I know if Deadline put out a story saying, John Campea to take over the online presence for Regal Cinema, doing basically what he did for AMC theaters, now he's going to do it for Regal Cinema. I know that if Deadline ran that story and it wasn't true, I would get on Twitter pretty much right away and say, hey, I don't know where this story's coming from that I'm joining Regal. Regal's great and everything, but this isn't true. I'm not joining Regal. I certainly wouldn't wait 11 weeks. 11 weeks, not 11 hours, not 11 days, but about 11 weeks has passed since that Deadline story about him doing the voice of Frosty the Snowman came out. If it actually isn't true, how come your agent didn't simply tell Deadline that's not true? How come you didn't wait 11 hours to say, hey, this is fake news? How come you didn't wait 11 days? Why did you wait 11 weeks? I think all of this, again, remember, there is a difference sometimes between what we believe and what we know to be true. What I'm about to say, I definitely do not know to be true. It's simply what I believe right now, and what I believe can change as new evidence comes in. But everything I'm seeing right now, here's where I'm at right now. It's my own little tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. Here's where I'm at right now. This is all a big Warner Brothers job. I think we are all being gamed by Warner Brothers. I think we are all being jobbed by Warner Brothers right now. I really do. I think this is all coordinated. I honestly, right now, I think Jason Momoa is in on it with Warner Brothers. I think Fisher is in on it with Warner Brothers. I think this is all a big PR job that Warner Brothers is pulling on everybody right now. Creating this narrative and creating everybody talking. Wonder why I'm thinking that? Let's back it up a little bit. When we knew to be true that Ben Affleck was out as Batman years ago, Warner Brothers coordinated with Ben Affleck to keep the narrative going that he was still Batman. Remember? He went to Comic-Con, got on stage at Comic-Con. The day after, the Hollywood Reporter put out a story verifying what I had told everybody, that Ben Affleck was out as Batman. He got on stage at Comic-Con the next day and said, I'm definitely still Batman, everybody. I'll crawl like an ape, referring to his Planet of the Apes movies that Matt Reeves did. I'll crawl like an ape for Matt Reeves. Woo, I'm Batman, everybody. Yeah, I'm Batman. That was all a work. Warner Brothers coordinated with Ben Affleck and his PR people, and they created this big narrative, tried to project this narrative that he was still Batman. It's all great. Also, let's look at the Snyder Cut thing. Remember a number of months ago, like out of nowhere, like Jason Momoa and like Gal Gadot, they put out these like, hey, release the Snyder Cut hashtags, right? And it created this thing where everybody's like, see, Warner Brothers should listen to these guys. Even these guys are telling Warner Brothers they need to release a Snyder Cut. Well, what did we find out later on? We found out later on that the deal for HBO Max to release the Snyder Cut was already in place months before Jason Momoa and Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot apparently took to Twitter on their own volition to support the Snyder Cut. It was all coordinated by Warner Brothers PR. Create this, it's us against the world, everybody. They created that thing, even though Warner Brothers was kind of painting themselves as the villain a little bit. They were creating this false narrative that, oh, look, all the actors and everything are against us as Warner Brothers. They want us to release the Snyder Cut. Oh, no, what are we as Warner Brothers going to do? It was all planned. We found out the deal with HBO Max had already been in place. This was all coordinated by Warner Brothers PR and those actors and their representation, and it was all a job. They jobbed us. They got a bunch of people all worked up and all riled up. Meanwhile, it was Warner Brothers pulling the strings the whole time. It was Warner Brothers pulling the strings the whole time. They played us. That's two examples of when Warner Brothers played us. And I am just looking at this situation right now, and I don't know why. I don't know what the end game is, but I am honest. This is so out of character on so many levels. This is starting to look to me like Warner Brothers is playing us all again. I am honestly, again, what I believe and what I know to be true can sometimes be two very different things. This is just something that I'm believing right now based on the evidence that I've seen. It's my own kind of machinations and speculation. That's all it is. But I think this is all Warner Brothers. I think this is Warner Brothers coordinating with Jason Momoa. I think this is Warner Brothers coordinating with Ray Fisher, because you know what? Vince McMahon, you know when Vince McMahon made the most money in the WWE is when they wrote stories that he was the bad guy. You want to know why Stone Cold Steve Austin was the most popular wrestler of all time? It's because Vince McMahon wrote the stories that Vince was the bad guy and Stone Cold was the hero. And everybody got, yeah, it's us against the man, right? And that's when Vince McMahon made his most money. I am telling you right now, my opinion could change as new evidence comes in. My opinion could, I'm not going to die on this sword. My opinion could totally change on this. But this is starting to smell like the Warner Brothers PR department once again gaming everybody and conning everybody. Because again, there just makes no sense to me that Jason Momoa, who is making all these movies with Warner Brothers, who just did this big online Q&A, talking about, woo, making Dune, and woo, we're making Dune, everybody, my new Warner Brothers movie, and all blah. It just makes no sense to me that he's like 11 weeks after they announced that Frosty is going to be voiced by Jason Momoa. Not 11 hours, not 11 days, 11 weeks later, when there's been no indication in any of the media that Deadline's report wasn't accurate. 11 weeks later, he suddenly comes out and says, oh, fake story that never even had my permission to get out there. I'm like, something smells funny here. Something smells. And again, I admit, you don't have to accuse me of wearing a tinfoil hat here. I fully admit it. There's a very, very tinfoil hat conspiracy theoryism about this whole thing that I'm totally wearing. I acknowledge it. I admit it right up front. But this is starting to smell to me when you look at the Ben Affleck situation, when you look at the release the Snyder Cut situation that happened. This is smelling more and more like Warner Brothers PR totally creating a narrative to get everybody talking, to get everybody riled up, to get everybody taking Stone Cold Steve Austin's side, or in this case, Jason Momoa and Ray Fisher's side. Warner Brothers kind of painting themselves a little bit as the bad guy. And ooh, everybody, you should get excited about this. Don't you want the hero, Jason Momoa and Ray Fisher, to come out on? I'm starting to think this is all scripted. Convince me I'm wrong. I'm totally open that I could totally be wrong on this by a million miles. You don't have to say it because I'm acknowledging that. But it's starting to smell like, this smells like a WWE script, my friends. This smells like a WWE script. But anyway, that's just kind of my take on that. All right, let's move on. Tremaine Fields. Tips $20. Thank you so much for supporting the channel that level, man. Hey, John, thanks for taking my question. It's my pleasure. Thank you for supporting the channel. It is an age-old question, and that is, why don't movies based on books follow the books exactly? Following a book can't be much different than following a script/screenplay, right? Help me understand. Well, there's there's a million little nuanced things, but there are two main reasons, all right? Two main reasons. Main reason number one, and I'm not saying these in any particular order, okay? So when I say number one, I just mean the first one we'll talk about here is if you look at some books, they're like 550 pages. Some are like 380 pages. Some are like 700 pages. And when you look at some books, is that the average screenplay is between 90 and 120 pages long. 500-page book, probably 110-page screenplay. By itself, that alone kind of dictates that you need adaptation. Just by itself, that thermodynamic rule of the universe of time and space just kind of dictates that you need some kind of adaptation. The second big reason, though, and I would maybe argue is probably the more important one, is that just because something works well on a printed page does not necessarily mean it would play out as well in a live action environment. We see that play out a lot in comic book movies, right? Where a lot of times, there's something they do in the comic books, and that's fine in a printed comic book page. That can work, or that can work, or that can work. But it may come across completely, how it is received and how it comes across can be completely different as you move from one medium to the next. It's like, that works here, but it wouldn't work in a live action environment. And so you change it. Plus, with the whole length situation, sometimes entire characters need to be removed, right? But maybe that a character you need to remove actually did a couple of important things. Okay, then we'll take that important thing that this character did in the book that we can no longer have in the movie for time issues. We're going to take something they did and attribute that action to another character that we are keeping in the movie. I mean, so it all gets broken down to adaptation. That's why I have often made the argument that writing an adapted screenplay, I would argue, because I've heard a lot of screenwriters say this, and I agree, writing an adapted screenplay is actually harder and takes more creativity than just writing an original screenplay. Because when you're writing an original screenplay, you've got no rules you have to follow. Like, you can just do whatever you want. I can just write whatever I want. But when you get somebody who's trying to write an adaptation of a pre-existing piece of material, and you're trying to stay as faithful as you can, but you got to make all these changes in order for it to work and blah, blah, blah. It is an insanely thankless and difficult task. And that's why, number one, I'm really glad that the Oscars have two separate categories, original screenplay and adapted screenplay, because I believe the people who write adapted screenplays, it is tough. It is really, really tough. So anyway, that's it. Again, there are a million other nuanced reasons why, but those are two of the big arguments that I would say you'll come across about why a movie doesn't and shouldn't just follow the book exactly, right? So those are my two arguments why. All right. Although there's a lot of other nuance to that. I'm just answering in a couple of minutes. Anyway, thank you for writing that in. All right. Il Postino, the postman, writes, hey, John, let's pretend that I am a billionaire and not a postman. Hey, who says you can't be both? What if you just really like your job? Just because you got $1 billion in the bank doesn't mean you can't do your job if you love it. Anyway, I want to tip you $500 million to write, produce, and direct Whitey McWhite and the Whites. Because I made up the thing, say, man, you could have a movie called Whitey McWhite's in the Land of the Whites and still qualify for Oscar consideration under the new rules. Anyway, let's see here. Where are we at? What is your vision for the film? It can be anything you want within budget, but you must keep the title. Okay, Whitey McWhite and the Whites. If I had to make a movie called Whitey McWhite in the Land of Whites, which is what I actually said the other day, Whitey McWhite in the Land of Whites, what would I make that movie about? Honestly, I think the best idea is because you remember, any movie, you create your setting or establish your character, and then you introduce an element that throws that setting or character into chaos, right? That's your basic the beginnings of your 3-act structure. So, to me, the most logical thing, if I was making the movie Whitey McWhite in the Land of Whites, I'd make a story about Thad, just making up a name, Thad living in his neighborhood, on White Street. Let's call it White Boulevard. No, let's call it White Drive. Thad White living in the Land of Whites in a movie called Whitey McWhite, living on White Drive. And just the experience of living in such a culture. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Rashawn from India moves in next door. That would be following your classic 3-act structure, right? Like, so you've got your setting, your characters. Now, what happens to throw that into chaos? The most logical thing would be Rashawn from India moves in next door. And how does that upend everything that has to go on with the land on White Drive and in the Land of Whites? What does that do? So that's probably where I would go. That is where I would go, El Postino. That's what I would do. All right. Now, you can, by the way, still send me $500 million anytime you like. I believe PayPal can handle a $500 million tip. So if any of you feel like donating $500 million, but you're worried that, well, maybe PayPal can't handle that size of a tip, don't worry. I've been assured that PayPal can indeed handle that size of a tip. So by all means, don't let that stop you. Don't let that stop you. All right. Next up, John Argot Rodriguez writes, from what you've said about your youth, it sounds like you were heading into law. I worked in law, actually, but in LA made the jump to VFX. Actually, I worked in VFX when I was still in Canada. I never worked in VFX in LA. I was actually I worked for a period of time with a visual effects and CGI company in Canada. I'm curious, did you have any prior experience in visual effects? Lately, I've been watching VFX videos and I'm becoming really fascinated by visual effects. Not really. The only experience I had in visual effects was like doing my own, because I've been into doing video like way in the early days of Final Cut Pro and in the earliest of days of Premiere and all that kind of stuff. Like 14 years ago, I made a fan film. Me and some friends made a fan film, a Star Wars fan film. I edited it. I did all the visual effects on it. I even had CG animated battle droids. And I actually animated the battle droids and everything. And it did all the visual effects. As you can imagine, they weren't great. But I first joined the visual effects company as client relations. So I was kind of the go-between. I wasn't hired. I didn't become a part of that team as an artist. I was a part of that team as client relations. So it was my job to be the go-between between the client and our artists to make sure they were getting what they wanted. And in modern terms, I was kind of like the project manager. I was a project manager for all intents and purposes. But we were also a very small company. So there were some times that I actually needed to do some of the visual effects work, but not of the real creative work, like more of like we would call it being a roto monkey, because rotoscoping was a tireless, thankless, just kind of repetitive next frame, rotoscoping, next frame. And I would do that. I even remember one time we got this contract to do a province-wide telecommunications commercial, but we were also doing a movie at the time. Like, we actually had the contract to do work on the visual effects for a movie, like a real, like Hollywood wide release movie. And so our real artists were working on that. So it's like, John, can you handle doing this commercial? I'm like, sure. So I actually ended up doing the full 30-second. I produced it, did the visual effects for it, my whole bit. But I love visual effects because visual effects really speak to the magic of the movies. And I just always had a deep love and appreciation for them. So, I mean, if you got that creativity, you go do it. I'm the wrong person to ask about how to be a visual effects artist because I'm not a visual effects artist. I don't have that skill set like the real artists and the real professionals do. Not at all. I don't fall into that category at all. But if you've got that itch and if you've got that gift, by all means, go and do it, my friend. Go and do it. All right, next up, Johnny writes, "Hey, John and Rob, I'd like to recommend a show I found on Netflix called High Score." Isn't that like the video game documentary? Isn't that the documentary? It goes over the revolutions in video game history. I found it interesting, and it made me miss the days I played video games. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, and stay safe. If it's the one I'm thinking of, Johnny, I thought that was like a documentary movie. But maybe it's a docu-series. Maybe it's a docu-series. I thought that was just a straight-up documentary. But at any rate, I am very fascinated by that because I love the history of video games, so I'm definitely going to check that out at some point. Thanks for writing that in, man. Yellow Flash is saying, John, you're thinking of King of Kong. No. That's a very different movie. There's a new thing on Netflix, I believe, called High Score. I just thought it was a documentary, not a series. King of Kong is a totally different thing. That was like 10 years ago. This is something totally different. I just thought it was a documentary, not a series. That's all. Okay, next up. Let's see here. An anonymous viewer writes, "Hey, John and Rob, if Netflix came with $80 to $100 million offer for Warner Brothers to get Tenet's rights, do you think Warner Brothers would accept?" No. It will help them to break even. No, it won't. And Netflix will get a popular movie that people will want to watch 2 or 3 times. It makes sense for both. No, it makes absolutely no sense for Warner Brothers at all. Warner Brothers has already made over $200 million theatrically with the movie. They've already made over $200 million. As it continues to go on and as more and more people start to come back to the movie theaters and as more and more theaters open up in places like New York and California, the biggest movie markets in the world where the theaters are currently, for the most part, still closed, they're going to make more money. Now, are they going to make 500 million more? No, they're just not in this economy, not in this environment. They're just not, but they're going to make more money. They're going to make more than the $80 to $100 million. Plus, by releasing Tenet in theaters, Warner Brothers can't allow. They're not allowed to have Tenet pop up on a streaming service for at least 2.5 more months. For at least 2.5 more months, because they have to follow the theatrical window. By putting their movie in theaters that are open, they made an agreement that they have to follow the theatrical window. So it wouldn't be allowed to pop up on Netflix. Not to mention, even when it's time for it to go to streaming, Warner Brothers has HBO Max. They're not going to let Tenet go to another streaming service. They're going to put it on HBO Max and use Tenet as another piece of bait to get people to come in and sign up for HBO Max. So yeah, if Netflix could get Tenet for $80 to $100 million, that makes all the sense in the world for Netflix. Sure, absolutely. That's an easy deal to make if you're Netflix. But it doesn't make any financial sense or any strategy sense for Warner Brothers in the least. That makes no sense for Warner Brothers. Makes all the sense in the world for Netflix, but not for Warner Brothers. All right. Luis Cortez writes, "Who's a better actor, Jensen Ackles or Jared Padalecki? I think Jensen is. The best scenes in Supernatural are the ones where Dean is emotional. My favorite is when he finally opens up to scene about what he did in hell in season 4. What are your favorites? What's your favorite scene?" I don't carry around my favorite scene in Netflix or in Supernatural overall. I don't know which one, because both Jared and Jensen have too limited of resumes, really, to know who the better actor of the two is. I think they're both outstanding in Supernatural. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, though. Now, Jensen is going to be Soulja Boy in season 3 of The Boys. I don't know how long we're going to have to wait to see that, though. Jared has that new, the remake of Walker, Texas Ranger is coming out, so we'll get to see him do some stuff there. But I have no opinion yet as to which one is the better actor. I don't have any opinion yet as to which one is better. As far as what my favorite scene in Supernatural is, I'm not sure, but it would probably involve one with Crowley. Because Crowley, I think, is actually my favorite character on Supernatural. So it would probably be one that involved him. All right, next up. Kirk Lazarus writes, let's see here. I really hope they keep the mystique of Black Noir. That character is so mysterious, and we're talking about a character from The Boys, by the way. That character is so mysterious, and it's very intriguing. He's all body language and hand gestures. His nonverbal communication is also very unpredictable. Loving The Boys, so ready for the next episode. I love Black Noir. Even if you go back to season 1, right? When the 7 are all at their big table, their big conference table, and Homelander is like, you guys are all slacking, you're not pulling your weight. But then he turns to Black Noir, except for you, Black Noir, you're killing it, buddy. Because Black Noir is the guy, right? He's kind of there, in a way, he's a mix between Snake Eyes and Batman. It's like, it's even Homelander knows. I probably shouldn't. You never see him messing. He's messed with every member of the 7, whether it's threatening them or trying to bully them. You've never seen Homelander mess at all with Black Noir. Now, maybe that's just because he likes him, or maybe like there's something inherently really scary about Black Noir. I don't know, but you're right, man. The fact that he doesn't have any dialogue only adds to that mystique. I personally hope they never take his mask off and we never hear him talk. I want him to never take the mask off and to never hear him talk, because I just don't want them to kill that mystique they have about him. All right. Ryan Lohner writes, looking forward to the reveal that Baby Yoda is Obi-Wan's granddaughter. Go on. Just try to say with 100% confidence that it won't happen. Oh, dude, I can't. I mean, obviously it's highly unlikely, but with the state, Lucasfilm is in, who knows? Obi-Wan got into a passionate affair with Yaddle at some point, and behold, the child was born. Maybe once the child starts speaking, he's going to have this weird British accent. And if he does, then you know that it's true. Obi-Wan and Yaddle doing the filthy. And then along comes Baby Yoda. I'm telling you, it's a possibility. Highly unlikely, Ryan, but not impossible. Justin writes, one of two. Have you heard of the Broadway show Come From Away? I have not. It tells the story of Gander, Newfoundland, after the events of 9/11, and how the small population nearly doubled in size when 28 planes were instructed to land there. While I'm very familiar with the story of Gander, Newfoundland. Nearly the whole thing is sung through, so you can listen to the soundtrack without missing the story and feeling lost. One of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. Yeah, when 9/11 happened, a lot of people don't know the story of Gander, Newfoundland. Newfoundland, I'm sure most of you have no idea what it is or where it is. Newfoundland is actually one of the provinces of Canada, and it's on the East Coast. When 9/11 happened, a lot of planes were in the air, and, American airspace became locked down. So a lot of planes that were in the air, American planes, got redirected, and this little town in Newfoundland said, you can come here. You can come here and land here. And actually, I think it was ABC did this big story, like almost mini documentary story on, and it makes me, one of the many reasons I'm very, very proud to be Canadian, that when people landed, all these people from the town didn't just come to the airport to greet all these Americans who were now stranded, couldn't go home. They were all stranded. And these Canadians taking people home and saying, you need a place to stay? You need a place to crash? Load them up. We got our car outside. Let's load you up. We'll take you in. We'll make you feel at home, blah, blah, blah. And these Canadians took care of all these Americans who had to land there. It's just it's Canadian culture. Let me say this. Canadian culture is all about helping your neighbor out. Everything about Canadian culture is helping your neighbor. I mean, that just seems to be the bottom line of Canadian culture. And you see that most in wintertime, because in wintertime, it snows, you got to shovel your sidewalk, right? Half the time when I would live in a neighborhood, I'd look outside, I'd see neighbors just shoveling each other, saying, I'm out shoveling anyway, I'll shovel my neighbor's stuff. I mean, that's just the Canadian way. But the story of Gander, Newfoundland is one of those stories that really does make me feel a lot of pride being Canadian. It's like, that's my people. That's what our people do. And it's if you can look up I think it was ABC, if you can look up that news story and actually see the story about it, it's really inspiring. But I had no idea, Justin. I had no idea that they had turned that into I had no idea they turned that into a musical Broadway show. I had no clue of that whatsoever. Thanks for letting me know about it. All right, Samurai Jack tips $20. Thank you so much for supporting the channel on that level, man. Samurai Jack writes, hey, good morning, John and Rob. I was wondering your thoughts. If Kang the Conqueror is a descendant of Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, does this not mean that Marvel is making the Fantastic Four a team of color by casting Jonathan Majors? Thanks. Again, this comes down to one of the big misconceptions everybody has. Just because, and listen, I'm not well versed enough. I've read Kang in the comics a bunch, but I'm not well versed into Kang's history. But if they had set something like that up in the comics, that absolutely does not mean at all that they're going to do it in the movies. You know, we as these movie fans have to come to a point where you got to understand there's no association between the comic books and the movies. They may carry some things over, but we should never assume they're going, just because something happens in the comic book does not mean they're going to do it here in the movies, right? Again, X-Men Days of Future Past, nothing like the comic book story. Age of Ultron, nothing like the Ultron story. Captain America Civil War, other than some thematic similarities, totally different story, totally different movie than what was played out in the comic books. It's totally different. So by going, oh, in this comic it did this, so that means in the movies this is this, we gotta not ever make those assumptions. So it means nothing. Right now, it means absolutely nothing. Remember, Kevin Feige said when Disney was taking over Fox that he said, I am not figuring anything about the X-Men or Fantastic Four or anything in any of my plans. I've got the next 5 years planned out. That means he already had Kang planned before he had any idea that they were getting the Fantastic Four. So I wouldn't make any assumptions that A equals B. I would not make those assumptions right now. It's totally something that's available to Kevin Feige if that's the way he wants to go. But we should not make any assumptions that or base any of our theories on, well, this happened in the comics. That really means nothing. In the movie world, it really means nothing. So got to keep our eyes on that. But let's see what happens. There's a lot of tools available to Kevin Feige right now if he wants to go that way. So let's see what he chooses to do. All right, Marie Cheese writes, hi, John. Did you get a chance to see the trailer for the Chicago 7 teaser trailer, trial of the Chicago 7 teaser trailer? I did. I thought it looks great, and I'm excited to see Sorkin writing for the courtroom again. Very interesting cast as well. Listen, the last movie Sorkin directed, I believe, was what's the one he did with the poker stuff? Hold a second. What was the one he did with poker again? I'm forgetting the name of the movie. Let me pull it up here. Molly's Game. Molly's Game. I loved Molly's Game. Had Idris Elba, Kevin Costner, Jessica Chastain. I thought he did he wrote and directed that film. I thought he did a great job directing that movie. I thought Molly's Game deserved more awards consideration than it got. I really do. So here he's back again, directing again. He's got Joseph Gordon-Levitt in there. He's got Sacha Baron Cohen in there, who looks great. It's a really good trailer. Again, my enthusiasm gets a little bit tempered because it is a Netflix original. Netflix original movies, way more often than not, end up disappointing me badly. Like, I was all excited about the one they just did with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx. What was it called? Power Station or something like that? Whatever the name of it was, where you take the pill and you get a superpower for 5 minutes. I thought that looked awesome. I was all excited for it. And then I watched it and I'm like, meh. So The trailer looks great. The trailer looks great. I loved the last time Sorkin directed. I loved what happened the last time he directed. But you got to forgive me if, at least for the moment, my enthusiasm gets a little tempered by the fact that it's a Netflix original, and more times than not, those have been letting me down. Extraction, I thought was bad. The Power movie, I didn't think was very good. I mean, they've also crushed it a couple of times, right? Like The Irishman, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Old Guard, fantastic. I really liked Old Guard. But unfortunately, those movies to me are in the minority. They're the exceptions. And I've usually get disappointed by Netflix movies, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Their television is top notch, though. All right, Comic Planet. Am I on the right place? Yes. My Comic Planet writes, "Hey, John, big fan of the show. Thank you so much. Did you hear the news that Grace Randolph revealed this morning about Pedro Pascal? She said he became difficult and went to Lucasfilm to get them to intervene on his behalf regarding issues, but things went bad and they parted ways. This is shocking to hear, and I find it very hard to believe, and I know you don't like speculating on things like this, but given the connections and credibility Grace has, just wanted to know if you had heard anything about it." I'm going to say this. Listen, I'm not going to get into a situation where I'm talking about any other specific YouTuber and what it is they say or don't say. I try not to play that game. I will just say this, though. You see, look, I want to point something out that's factual. But the internet is a cesspool, right? The internet is a cesspool. There's a very big elephant in the room that I could reference right now, a factual thing that happened with Star Wars and Disney. But if I do, even if I'm trying to say it and I try to phrase it in the most, objective, simple way possible, the internet is a cesspool, and there are going to be people on the internet who try to turn it into a Campea is throwing Grace Randolph under the bus and blah, blah, blah. And I just don't want to have any part of that. I just don't want to have any part of that whatsoever. So without getting into it, all I will say is this. I do not believe the story. I'll just say that. I don't believe the story. That's no negative commentary on Grace Randolph. That's no negative. I'm not saying anything negative about anybody. But if you're just asking me, do I believe that story? No, I don't believe I don't believe the story. For my own reasons. And again, I could point to something else, but if I did, people would say I'm trying to, say something about Grace, and I'm not. So I'm just going to say that, and I'm going to let it go. All right. Dwight's Famous Beats writes, "Big fan, John. Am I crazy, or did you once do a long video explaining how to start a YouTube channel business?" I did. I am launching a channel and have looked up to you for years, and I would like to learn from the master. If you didn't make that video, would you? I did make a video, but it's years ago now. It is many years ago. But let me see if I can bring it up here for you. Let me see if I can find it. All you really need to do... John Campea getting started. All you got to do is go onto YouTube, right? And just search for the phrase John Campea getting started. And at the very top, you'll see a video I did 6 years ago called Getting Started in Online Film Talk on Your Own Blog, YouTube, or Podcast. Now, it should be pointed out that a lot of stuff that I talk about on here transcends just doing movie stuff. Like, if you could be talking about watches, right? You could be talking about watches. I mean, you may want to start a podcast about watches and all the practical analog watches, all the new smart watches. You want to do a whole YouTube channel or a podcast about them. I think a lot of the principles that I talk about in this video, it's a 2-hour video. A lot of the principles are completely transferable. It's not just about movie stuff. Now, granted, it might be a little outdated for some people. Like I said, it is 6 years old now, but it's a 2-hour video that I go into my own personal story about how these principles applied to me and how I applied these principles. So that is there. Again, just do a quick search for John Campea Getting Started on YouTube, and it should be the top thing that pops up on your thing there. And I hope you find that helpful. I hope it works for you. Let's see here. Thank you for writing that in, my friend. All right, next up, we've got an anonymous viewer writes in. I am curious how they will be able to pull off Galactus. Unpopular opinion, but I think they will have to put some changes to his character and backstory in order for him to translate well on screen. His origin in the comics is way too confusing. And remember, he's had different iterations of his origin explained in the comics before, right? That only adds to the confusion. Galactus is a great... First of all, no one's ever said that they're going to do Galactus in the MCU. Just keep that in mind. The other thing is Galactus is a great example of a character that works a certain way on a comic book page, but I don't think you can do it that way on a live action movie. I think it would just come across as ridiculous. Plus, I mean, you can't fight Galactus. I mean, it just is what it is. So if, and that's a big if, Anonymous, if they ever do Galactus, and we don't know that they ever will, but if they ever did, I am in agreement with you. It would be a heavily adapted character. Not a giant space fart cloud. They wouldn't necessarily make Galactus a giant space fart cloud. But they would have to do something to drastically adapt him so that character would work properly on the big screen. It's going to take a lot of adaptation. So, number one, I don't even know if Kevin Feige will ever do it. But if they did, it's going to take a lot of creative adaptations to maintain the spirit of what that character is while adapting him so it works well in a live action environment. It's going to be interesting to see. All right. Casey McNatt writes, I thought the trailer was great, talking about Mandalorian. I thought the best part was when Baby Yoda is like, well, looks like a fight is about to break out and bullets will start flying. Let me get under this bulletproof dome. Can't wait for October. I agree. That was my absolute favorite part of that trailer as well, which is this scene right here. I love this scene. He's like, oh, there's the whistling birds. I've seen this song and dance before. Yoink! And the little thing closes. Love Baby Yoda. I mean, Baby Yoda, the novelty of Baby Yoda has not worn off. And as much as Baby Yoda swept the world during season 1 of Mandalorian, it hasn't worn off. He's going to totally sweep the world again. Baby Yoda Mania is going to sweep the world again. I'm telling you right now, Casey, he's going to sweep the world again. And I agree with you. That's my favorite part too. All right. Nerds of Porn writes, John, I know you're not into TMZ style stories, but any thoughts on Jason Momoa's post on Instagram supporting Ray Fisher's claims and accusations of mistreatment? Again, I went into that ad nauseum a little bit earlier on quite a long rant. I think this is a WWE script. I think Warner Brothers is coordinating all of this. And I could be way wrong. Could be way wrong. I don't know that to be true. Could be way wrong. But everything about this smells very fishy. No, that's not an Aquaman pun. That's not an Aquaman pun. But I believe what we have here is a Vince McMahon WWE job, just like Warner Brothers jobbed everybody with the whole release the Snyder Cut stuff when it was already the done deal, and they coordinated all that, just like Ben Affleck's I'm Still Batman. I am suspecting this is Warner Brothers working with Jason Momoa, I think this is all one big PR stunt. I really do. All the puppet strings are being pulled by Warner Brothers here. And I think they're all working together. But again, that's just my take on it. All right, Dylan Payton writes, hey, John, my brother who has COVID-19, I'm sorry to hear about that, is doing well, by the way. Good to hear. He appreciates your support. Love your show. I got to say, I love the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer. I am almost done buying my child's statue. What is your favorite or movie TV collectible? Oh, gosh. Favorite movie or like... I mean, I don't know. I'm honestly not a collector of really basically anything. I mean, I have a whole ton of pops and I have a few hot toys, but I'm honestly not a collector. So buying collectibles has never really been my thing. Now, it may shock you to find out that my favorite collectible thing that I've ever bought isn't even movie related. It's a 17th century book by a theologian. And their commentary on the Gospel of St. John. Yes, a 17th century theologian writing about their observations about the Gospel of John is like my favorite possession. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's my favorite. So I don't know. I mean, listen, I can tell you the favorite one I've ever seen in person. My favorite one I've ever seen in person was when I visited Skywalker Ranch. And I went into one of the cottages, and there in the middle of the wood floor and everything is this glass case with Luke's lightsaber from Star Wars, the original film, New Hope, sitting there. Right across from that, along the wall, because the lightsaber is right in the middle of the floor. It's in this glass case right in the middle of the floor. But along the wall was another glass case with the idol from the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark. The little idol that Indy grabs and swaps with a bag of sand. That idol and Indy's whip were sitting there. So I was standing there in a room with Luke's original lightsaber and the idol and Indy's whip from Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I just about defecated myself. It's like I was so overwhelmed. Like that's the idol. That's the lightsaber. I just about defecated myself. Couldn't stay in that room very long. But as far as my own collectibles, I don't have a ton. I'm not like Rob. I don't collect a lot of stuff, unfortunately. All right, next up. An anonymous viewer writes, John, do you think other studios are looking at Tenet's numbers and are considering that maybe it wouldn't have done that great in a normal in a normal time? I look at Tenet's numbers and think Black Widow or Wonder Woman could do very well right now. Well, I mean, it all depends. It all depends because remember, like, do I think a Wonder Woman or Black Widow could come out right now and do better than Tenet did? Yes, but that's partially because Tenet came out. Like, don't forget that. Tenet coming out, being the first big movie to come out and relaunch movie theaters, it's like being the first penguin to dive into the water when you know there's a lion seal down there somewhere, right? When a ton, other than people like you and me who follow movie feeds and everything like that, a lot of people out there still don't even know or realize that movie theaters are open. So Tenet being the first horse out of the gate, I think lays the groundwork that if a Wonder Woman or Black Widow were to come out, say, in 2 weeks, that they would do better than Tenet did. But that's partially because of the work that Tenet did. Because Tenet came out, and because Tenet got the theaters open, and because Tenet started to raise awareness that the theaters were back and people could go if they wanted to. Because of that, yeah, I think Wonder Woman or Black Widow could open in the next 2 to 3 weeks and do better than Tenet did. Can they do great? Oh, still probably not. Not yet. But I think they would, I agree. I think both of them would do better than Tenet did right now, but that's partially in thanks to what Tenet has done. So it's kind of a little bit of a causality there. To quote Vision, it's a little bit of causality. All right. Evan Ryan writes, hey, John, I'm very excited for the Suicide Squad. Me too. Who do you think will most likely die? Thanks. Listen, that's the question a lot of people have been asking and that I've been asking an awful lot too. Seeing the preview for it, that little sizzle that they played at DC Fandom that James Gunn kind of presented was great. I've been excited about this movie ever since they announced that James Gunn was directing it. He's a perfect fit for a movie like that. You would think traditional rationale would say Polka Dot Man would be the first guy to die. But James Gunn is not your traditional film director, right? James Gunn is not your traditional director. So Polka Dot Man could actually end up being like the main hero of the movie. You never know. I'm not saying Polka Dot Man will definitely be the main hero of the movie. That's not what I'm saying, but I wouldn't put it past James Gunn. I'm thinking Idris Elba's character dies. I don't know why. Him or John Cena's character. I could see why, because I think it would, to shock people more, it would be one of the characters that I think people would less expect, but not somebody like Harley Quinn. Like, they're not going to kill Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is too valuable of a character to Warner Brothers right now, and there's too much they can do with her. So they're not going to kill Harley Quinn. But I think outside of Harley Quinn, it'll be one of the bigger people in the movie that the audience would not suspect. So that to me is either the John Cena character or the Idris Elba character. So I will put my virtual proverbial $5 on it being one of those two. All right, but I am also very excited for this movie, dude. All right, Emmanuel Ericart writes, "Hey, John, have you seen Wellington Paranormal? If the name doesn't make you excited, let me tell you, it's a spinoff of what we do in the shadows, and it's produced by Taika. And no, I heard before that they were going to do a spinoff based on the werewolves. Well, werewolves, not swearwolves. I heard before they were going to do something on them, but I didn't know that they actually made it. Did they actually make it? And first of all, if that's what it's about. So no, I am not familiar with that, but listen, What We Do in the Shadows is absolutely one of my favorite shows on television right now. I cannot believe, and I wasn't even excited about that show. I thought it was just going to be a cheap version of the movie of What We Do in the Shadows. I like it every bit as much as I like the movie. This show is brilliant. I love it, and anything that's connected to it, I'll try it out, but I did not know they actually went ahead and made that. So I will have to go and check that out, Emmanuel. Thank you for putting it on my radar. All right. Let's see. Shadow Jester writes, "Hey, John, I do agree mostly about the multiverse being a way to explain separateness, but for my other comment, the phrase, it's kind of a reboot, but won't forget what's happened, is why I think it's Batfleck. I don't know what this means. It's Batfleck, Flashpoint, Battinson, when Barry returns. I disagree. I don't think so at all. Listen, I think they've already made it very, very clear that Robert Pattinson's Batman is going to be a trilogy, and they've made it pretty clear they're keeping him separate from everything else. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't do something 7 years from now or whatever, right? Multiverse, I believe, is a way to explain why everything is separate, but it does provide openings if they choose to do something wacky. They've got the mechanism now there in place to do that. But I think they've been very, very clear that Pattinson's Batman is its own thing. It's its own separate universe, and he's going to stay there. Who knows what they'll do later, but I really don't think the multiverse stuff is about setting up to bring Robert Pattinson's Batman into the existing DCU. I don't think that's their plan at all. Never know. But I just I don't think that's the case right now. Who knows? We'll find out soon enough, though. All right, just a couple of minutes left here, guys. Taj and Cars writes, "Just wondering if you or any of my fellow viewers got their Baby Yoda from Sideshow yet. I pre-ordered mine when you ordered yours, but I haven't heard much from them since. I assume they'd be ramping up correspondence now that the new season is reminding. The new season won't have anything to do with it. They will release their Baby Yoda when they are ready to release their Baby Yoda. I was going to order it, but I didn't order it. So I don't have mine coming, unfortunately. Or maybe I do have one coming, because maybe Anne ordered one. Oh, did Anne? Maybe she did. Anyway, it's very possible Anne ordered one. I didn't, though. I didn't end up putting in an order in. But they aren't going to coincide it with the release of... They've already got all their orders, so they don't need to coincide it with the release of Season 2. They'll release it when they're darn good and ready to release it. But please, guys, when you get your baby... All of you who ordered the, 2-scale Baby Yodas that the 1-to-1 scale Baby Yodas they made, please send me pictures. I would love to see it. Just john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. Please email me your pictures when you get yours in, because I can't wait to see them. All right. Lawrence of Arrakis, I love the name, writes, "Hey, John, I honestly prefer the new Paramount Plus, but what about Hulu and how its previous name was Hulu Plus? If I remember correctly, any reason for the name change? Also, I love your show every day, and it never fails to bring a smile to my face. Bring on the filthy." Thank you so much. Yeah, Hulu had a Hulu Plus for a while, but then it's just gone. I guess they just never figured they needed it. And maybe they didn't want to cause confusion with Disney Plus or anything like that. And maybe they just decided they didn't need it. And reality is Hulu doesn't need the Plus name. It doesn't need that. So, because that kind of suggests... there's Hulu, then there's Hulu Plus. Really, they're the same thing. It's just about ads or whatnot. So maybe that explains. But I agree with you. Paramount Plus is a much better name, even just for branding. It's a much better name than CBS All Access. You're not going to get anybody excited with CBS All Access. And when you hear that name, it doesn't sound like a premium channel. So strictly for branding, I'm with you on this, Lawrence of Arrakis. I think Hulu Plus is the better name. But yeah, and again, for Hulu Plus, I think they just realized we don't need the plus. It's not helping our branding, and it may actually just cause confusion. So that's probably why they took that away. I love Hulu, by the way. It's still my favorite streaming thing that I have. All right, guys, listen. There's a couple of left here from Anonymous, Sam, and whatever. Do not worry. We will pick up tomorrow's show with your questions first. So we are out of time right now, but we will start up tomorrow's show with your questions first when we get to the live questions part of the thing. The 3 remaining questions will be the first questions that we answer. Guys, thanks so much for being here and making this a part of your day. Special thank you to all you guys who sent in these live questions. Number 1, you gave us great fun things to talk about. Number 2, you supported this channel while you did it. And all of us here, thank you guys so much for all of that. Guys, make sure you do the 4 main things. Stay smart, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of the people around you. That'll do it for me for now, guys. My name's John Campea. And until next time, my friends, bye-bye.